August 14th regular school board meeting. I'd like to call this to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comments concerning agenda items. So when we get to that agenda item, you will have a chance to speak. We have one person that signed in. Can you state your name real quick? I cannot read your name. 3742 North.
It's me.
Oh, Amanda, sorry.
Amanda.
Okay.
Amanda's already talking.
You're already
I
talking.
didn't
so,
know if I
okay.
needed to or not. So.
Okay, you're good, you're good. Okay, so we don't have anybody addressing public comments. The first thing I need this evening is a motion for the approval of the amended agenda we've given you tonight.
So second.
Any discussion on the approval of the amended agenda? Okay, all in favor of the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next motion I need this evening is a motion for the approval of the minutes from the July 17th, 2023 regular meeting. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting from July 17th? Okay, all in favor of the approval of the minutes for July 17th, 2023 regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving forward, we will do the superintendent's report. Mrs. Circle, you can have the floor.
We're gonna have our, Delphi School Corporation cafeteria director talk to us first. She did hand out something, looks like this, employee pay increase, that's not in your original packet.
Should be with your papers.
So, I have on here, the first one you received. It's just a rundown of all the employees, what they would do with their starting rate, current rate, and then what they would end up with their raise. And then it continues on to the back. I think honestly, with all of the shortages through the year, all of the times that we have had people out with COVID, people with the kids because of COVID, that they have went above and beyond. Everyone pulls their own weight. We've had sometimes even down at the high school kitchen, 3 people. That is a lot for that kitchen. And they've pulled it off. And it's been like this since I took over and before. I was one of these that was carrying on. I still go out and help on the floor. My assistant, she spent, almost an entire year down at the middle school? And that's not even where she needed to be that year. But in all, I think everyone pulls together very well. They've shown nothing but kindness, willingness to help me. I have people calling me from each kitchen all day long, asking me, can we do this, whatever it is. They consult me at every turn. I think it's just a great group of people. We're kind of like a family, some of us a little tighter than others. And then this other one here, this is basically a rundown, and there's a couple people that are on here that are getting hired in. There's a rundown of basically what it would be for the year with the new raise for everyone. And then also I had a position that, for later on, that I wanted to try to get an 8-hour position for the high school, with an incentive of $1 raise a month in, depending on, you know, their performance, basically. So that would come into play here as well. So I have another figure at the bottom that between that and the other 5.75 position that we have at the high school, that would be all of the figuring for the entire staff. We were fully staffed and we were so close. That's pretty much all I have for now. I can work with Andrea and get the rest of the figuring as far as costs for monthly, going out, in and out, and whatever else we need to see if this even fits with the budget. I don't have that.
What fund does this come out of?
What's that, I'm sorry?
What fund does this come out of?
Honestly, I don't 100% know exactly what the funding for this would be.
No, I mean your fund, explain your fund.
Oh,
That's what I'm talking about, sorry. How it's separate from our rest of
okay.
it.
So, we do have, I guess what is the reduced stuff that comes in. That is what we pay for the food with. So that's our reimbursements for the year, or month as we go. So it wouldn't come out of that. It would be, other earnings that we would pay this with. We have, like a la carte items, things like that, that we do all year long, that it would come from.
So if you're basically saying this is being paid for out of the cafeteria fund, not any other school fund?
No.
You are your own entity, and that's where your money's coming from?
Yes, yes, that's how it would have to be.
And you have to have a certain amount spent.
Yes. And another subject, yes, we have, some things that I am going to possibly be approaching with spending, things that we need for the cafeteria as well, as far as the kitchens go, necessities. So obviously that's gonna come into play too, but, we have a pretty good amount in there right now from what I can see.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the funds where we can't spend it, like we have too
Mhm,
much money in
yes.
there right now, so we're gonna get in trouble with the officers. We have to spend stuff, I
Yes.
know, the only fund that we can talk about over
Yeah, we
here.
want
And
an
technically-
education throughout the state.
Yes.
Technically, if we do not spend it, I think we're only allowed to have, 3 months in there at a time of what they are saying we should have, and we have more than that. They will take it back, the state will take that money back,
Of course.
so we'll lose out on it.
So when you post for positions,
Mhm.
how much response do you get?
Well, in the past, from what I've seen, like from when I took over, because I didn't really see any of that before December. When I come in January is when I seen it. We didn't really have a whole lot. And what we did have, I would have people respond to me coming in for an interview, and then we didn't hear from them. But for whatever reason now, I don't know if it is possibly maybe the different type of work environment that we have going on. Maybe people are hearing about this, or maybe we're just more widespread with our information of, hey, there's a job opening here and there. I've had a flood of people. Like, I'm almost fully staffed, and it's only been, well, since we come back, just a little before we come back. So I think that's pretty darn good. And if this 8-hour position is passed, I do possibly have it filled.
So the 8-hour position is a new position?
Yes.
It's not taking one that's at 5 or whatever and increasing it?
No, that is, I do believe technically I had 2 5.75 positions there, but I don't believe if we was to get this 8-hour position, I don't believe we'd really need either one of them anymore. So we'd probably
So that
just do
puts you
it.
at basically about 10, that's either 7 to 8, right?
Mhm.
And where would that person go?
They would be at the high school, that's where they would be needed. We do have a lady, that's going to be, covering our 8-hour position that we need filled last at the middle school here. I had a lady that just left for, For the elementary, over the summer, told me like right when we were coming back, was able to post her position. It's filled. She actually starts tomorrow, getting all the approval. And then the other lady, we were literally just waiting on her background check, and it's just days now. So we'll be at least fully staffed in those 2 kitchens, and then we might possibly have a replacement for the lady at Camden that's leaving. She's older and she's ready to go. So we're heading on a good track for the year, hopefully. I know it's hard to keep everybody, but with the incentive, with the pay increase, at least that would be some firing power with hiring. I think it would definitely make an improvement with people willingness to come in, especially an 8-hour position opposed to a 5.75. That's pretty much all I've got.
Thank you.
Mr. President, real
Yes.
quick on that note, I guess I'm overlooking if she's wanting us to approve that tonight.
No,
Okay.
this is all informational.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I asked Amanda to come
Okay.
present today, so that.
Well, she said if approved tonight,
Oh,
or
no,
approved.
she's got some.
The 8-hour position.
But I wanted to give everyone a month to ask me questions,
Okay.
and add some, and we're gonna put something in
Okay,
September.
that's fine. Just didn't know if you knew when I missed something.
Not on this one.
Is all of the hours paid out of cafeteria?
Yeah, they're on their own little funds.
What about benefits?
Things out of there. It's kind of different, it's like over here, I don't even put it in my budget. I don't even budget. Oh, yes. Okay, as Mr. Dale comes up, I want to recognize our new senior class presidents. Would you like to stand up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lacey Pickens.
Brayson Starbuck.
They're our new class presidents. We tried to get them up here, but they thought they'd come up.
We'll wait till next month.
Next month, you have to be up there. Part of the team, you're gonna be with the team.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Okay. Mr. Dale from athletics.
So Ms. Circle and I talked this last week, and she thought, well, let's do a report up here verbally where we can talk about the football line item that's on there, but then also, since I'm already gonna be here, we can kind of give you a recap of last year, as well as some of the issues we're dealing with currently. So, the big kind of negative right now that we're trying to work through is our soccer situation, which I know not all of you guys, at least a little update as to where we are. We had a late resignation. He took a teaching job in Lafayette, so that always hurts when you lose somebody at the last minute. Luckily, Alex has stepped up and trying to hold it together. I think our plan, talking to the families, obviously of the players, because our numbers are low, everybody's in support of that, so we're just trying to use that as a way to kind of backwards fill those numbers back up and hopefully be able to get the boys back viable again. I called around today, talked to some guys. Obviously, I've been talking to a lot of ADs in the last few days to get those contracts worked out where we aren't able to play them on the boys' side or the girls' side, depending on which one it was. And it's not it's not unique to us. Everybody around us is dealing with the same thing. North White today, when I talked to him, I think he said that 15 girls signed up, 8 have been showing up sporadically, and they only have 2 that can play at the moment, just because they don't have practices. So, I mean, and everybody's fighting. I think Rossville was at 15 and 15. Who else? Winamac, we just played them tonight. They have 13, but only 11 are able to play this evening. So it's kind of it's an uphill battle we're all fighting. But I think, like I said, with the plan, we have 4 or 5 people who have now came out that are either involved or have kids involved or whatever that have some soccer knowledge. But I think long term, we're going to be able to get some positive out of this. That's kind of the plan there. Our plan was to then fill the resigned role interimly, just for the interim, and then we'll make a full search in the off season if it's the person that fills it and does a great job, and we want to keep them great, but if not, we want to at least leave ourselves the flexibility instead of an emergency. But, and we talked about, since we're doing that kind of in the emergency role, make sure we got background checks and stuff, and we'll, like a teacher, get them in as quick as we can, and we'll get on September 4th. I'd like to have had it for you today on an amended agenda, but we didn't have background checks in, I didn't feel comfortable putting somebody else like that. Good news, got several good news things here. A couple of them back there actually are part of it. So our student leadership team will be bringing that back. The coaches and I have been working on who we're gonna refill our graduates with. We felt like we had some gains there with the kids. And we meet like once a month and talk about different leadership techniques or issues that they're dealing with. We've retained all of our head coaches minus the late resignation for the year, so I'm excited about that. That hasn't happened in a while. On the competitive side, I feel like, and I'm sure the kids could echo this, I feel like we had a great summer. We had a lot of kids coming into workouts. We had a lot of kids showing up to practices. And I feel like the culture, competitive side is kind of making a turn in the direction we hoped it would. Our youth camp structure was really positive this summer. Our goal was to have something every week that you could send your kids to for a couple hours, and we pretty well had something every week that they could experience. We talked in coaches council this month with my head coaches that now kind of the next step of that is to then push the marketing and the recruitment side to get the numbers bigger. But we did get a lot of positive feedback from parents who were like, hey, I got to try this sport or that sport, and I had never been able to do that before, so that was good. Website transition was rough, to say the least. We were promised some transition time, they didn't give it to us, but we did get everything rolled over before the season started, and actually Friday was getting compliments that they're able to see schedule changes immediately. That is a huge piece, because obviously that's about 90% of the traffic we get, so people wanting to know where to go and when to go. So I feel like that's good. And then with Jake taking over Parnassus, we're partnering up with them, so the kids will then be able to help populate our content with pictures and articles and stuff like that, more like a beat writer. So I'm excited in the next few weeks to start to transition that over. The fields are coming along. Obviously, CJ going to teach. I'm glad he's got that opportunity, but it puts us in athletics behind the 8 ball a little bit. He's been great at coming in, and him and I have been attacking every little bit we can, so we haven't missed or had to worry about any of this getting restructured. And then last year's recap, just on a positive note, we had a state finalist in swimming, semi-state and cross country. That obviously, anytime we get to that level of competition is something I feel like we need to remember. That's a huge accomplishment for those kids. And then in the spring, I don't know if we've had a spring like that ever. 2 sectionals, 2 regionals for baseball and softball. Baseball made the Final Four. We had a North-South All-Star in baseball. We had the state leader in strikeouts for softball. 6 track records went down. We had 3 conference and sectional champs in track, 9 regional qualifiers. The golf team, the boys golf team, won conference again. It's back-to-back, with Cade making it to his 3rd regional. And 3 of our 5 girls in tennis won conference. So those are all kind of the end-of-the-year man-outs. A wave that we rode. It was good. So we're hoping to kind of capitalize. That's kind of the report. We did get, as we met in, I think it was March, talked about middle school stuff. Baseball and softball did follow the path that was asked of them. They brought a black and white proposal to us. So these are the pluses and minuses. Brought it to the coaches council. Coaches council asked questions, voted on it. The coaches council approved, said yes, we like this. So now it's the circle and I are talking about it. We need to set a formal meeting where her and I can kind of lay out, here's the definite plus, here's the definite minus. This is something we can do here and there, to then decide whether to go up or down with it. So that was one I wanted to make sure everybody knew about. It was met positively by our coaches. It does solve several issues we deal with incoming freshmen, where that pony type schedule runs through June and backs them up into some stuff. So that's kind of the end of the report for the year. So the football lights, she wanted me to talk now, so that way we could ask questions and deal with it, and then it wouldn't have to take up time during voting time. So basically, when I was hired in 21, one of the first things I heard about was the football lighting situation. So that in 2020, there were 2 games that were affected by lights during the football season. Bacon Bowl, they went out in the middle of the 3rd quarter, I think, the 3rd or 4th, and then Clinton Central was the same way. One game they almost had to cancel. The team was ready to walk off the field, but they were able to convince them to play and flip the field repeatedly. obviously that impacts the thing a bunch. And then, so one of the first things I did was stress test the lights. They went dead immediately, like it was like 20 minutes. So we got them worked on, they got fixed, they went out again during the scrimmage. So we've had, at that point, 3 games that were impacted. We've band-aided them together the entire time in here. This is the first year I've tested them and they didn't go out, so I've got my fingers crossed, and it's a bit of anxiety every time I turn that switch on. The fans typically come up to me when it starts to get dark and say, "Are they gonna hold?" And I say, "I hope so." So that's kind of the background of it. The quotes that we've got and the kind of the process there. The Musco lights we obviously have experience with. They're basically the exact same thing we have at softball, which we love. They have been fantastic. The only issue we've ever had with them is somebody forgot to set the schedule long enough and they went out in the middle of the game and you turn them back on. But they're LEDs, so they immediately come back on. They basically, the setup that they would put at the track and the football would be the exact same. It's completely remote controlled. Every component that we need replaced will be replaced. They have remote monitoring from their location, I believe they're in South Dakota. And we work with them. They have a 25-year warranty, so for the next 25 years, if it breaks, it's fixed. They've already fixed one thing at softball. So that's kind of the reason that we like them. There's not an AD in the state of Indiana that'll tell you they're not the best.
Which company's that?
Musco. That's what they do. They don't really do any other lighting but sports light. So the other ones we have on there, Energy Harness was in the mix. They were in the thought process. Clinton Prairie just did a bunch of work with them, and they've had nothing. They haven't had anything negative to say about them. They've worked well with them. They said they had some delays in installation. They did work with them and got them temporary lighting to get through that. There's only a 5-year warranty on it, which really worries me. They are cheaper, there's no doubt about that. But that 5-year warranty is worrying for me because it's year 6 and they start to go bad, then we're in trouble for a big project like this. I also talked to Kokomo has some, and they basically told me, why spend the money on that when you can spend the money on something you trust? That's the kind of vibe I got from them. The Geo Sport stuff are definitely cheap, and I was told by the schools that are out, the schools I know that have them, that it's not worth even entertaining, that they have nothing but problems with them. They went out repeatedly in the little bit of time they've had, and really the only reason they went with them is because they are cheap. I trust Houston as an installer. That's the person who quoted it to us, but I don't necessarily trust the product that they're putting. And then the LED Indy, again, they're a little more on the expensive side. It is a 20-year warranty, but they are not a sports lighting company. They're getting into sports lighting, and most of those, basically everybody with Musco is going to be reusing at least some of the components that we know we need replaced. A panel or whatever. And a lot of the reason that those have been going out is because they were put in kind of, there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the way ours were originally put in, but it wasn't put in the best way. They used aluminum wire instead of copper, so the heat built from that high voltage, high amp draw just makes that stuff get loose and then it shorts out. And we deal with what we could do. It makes those breakers work a lot harder and they trip. So that is a concern of mine as well. So that's kind of the rundown and just to open it up for.
They're all LED quotes.
Yes, everything in there are LED quotes, which will, the estimate is it'll cut our energy consumption by at least half.
Okay, so that the draw will be significantly less.
Yeah.
I see.
This should be discussed after our motion.
So we brought up, he's just giving information.
Right.
We need to probably ask questions afterward. Sorry.
Kind of my fault.
Anything else?
What are our sports numbers like for the fall teams besides soccer, which you already talked about?
Tennis right now is hovering around 12. They're pretty healthy. That's been a good number for us recently. We have more than enough for lineup. plus some JV and subs. Cross country, our girls, if we get we have a few that are kind of dual sporting, if we've got them, we can score. If not, we're sitting at around 4 regulars, which is disappointing, obviously, because we've got Sarah out front with a really low number that we could really build on. Boys will be able to score there at like 6 or 8 regulars. The football numbers, low 40s, where we're at right now. They had a nice resurgence, did some good recruiting this season. We were in the high 20s last year. What am I missing? Girls golf is at 5. So really, numbers wise, we're in better shape than we were for the most part last year, minus. Yeah, cross country, that's been a pretty steady number. It seems like that 6 to 8. The middle school numbers for cross country are pretty good. We got a pretty decent health number. Middle school too, she's in the wrong. What did you have tonight?
We had 6 show up today for our first practice with rain, so I have about 12 on my last two birds. It was pretty good.
Which that's pretty consistent from where we were last year.
Else for athletics? Transportation, I first want to say a huge thank you to all our bus drivers, Mr. Strebeck, Mrs. Steigers. It's been very smooth, other than a couple kids that, in the afternoon in the elementary can't figure out which bus they're still going on, but they've done a lot of work trying to get all of this organized. One of the big things that I am concerned about in talking with Mr. Strebeck is transportation concerns, which is not unique with any other school corporation, but we're getting to the point where we have a lot of older bus drivers that are getting ready to retire. There is not a whole lot coming up, and one of our biggest problems is our ECAs, our sports. We right now, this week, have 3 events that are supposed to have transportation, and we don't have drivers for 3 of them. So that is a concern that Mr. Dale and I were talking about, as Mr. Dale looks at Mr. Strebeck to see if it's been fixed yet. But this is gonna be an issue, and then as we talk about adding other sports, because, if we add more, we already right now don't have the transportation drivers to drive kids to events. So that's something that we're struggling with. One of the things we may have to look at is we might have to end up paying overtime on some of our bus drivers that we haven't had to do before, so that we can get them to driving. So I'm just laying that out there. Anything you want to add in general with how things have started, start of school or transportation on?
No, that's went pretty smooth. We've had a few glitches from just simple things like we set up so Camden students, kindergartners that lived in Camden would go to Camden. Delphi students would only have a 5-minute bus ride to go to Camden. But then when you have 4 Camden kids get put to daycare at Radnor, it kind of messes things up, but nothing equal. And like you say, a few kids that don't know quite yet where they're going, but we even had a high schooler that was a new student this bus today, so it happens at all ages. On the ECAs, yeah, that's a tough one, because we can encourage our coaches to get their CDL, and we can train them up. What you're getting into is just there's a lot of older drivers that don't wanna drive after they're out. And you can't fault them there, I don't believe I can legally force them to drive them. And so, yeah, we're just running short on the number of drivers that wanna take ECA, and that throws them over into overtime if they take too many trips. We're looking at other options, but yeah, the biggest thing is if we could actually convince some of our coaches to at least drive their own team. I think I've got Mr. Walker convinced to do that for track and FFA.
Mine's easy, I already have a CDL.
We'll sign you up for another one then.
Yes, and that's something else too, Mr. Strebeck and I have talked about. If we get into a bind at some point in the future, we might need to look at some of the areas having to walk to school. Some closer areas like, around Camden, or, which we're not wanting to do that at this point, but we also can't close any options on this.
We're not a big school, but most of your big schools, if you live within 2 miles of the school, you have to provide your own transportation. Whether that's walk, drive, take a city bus, I know we're not that big, but it is an option. One of our closest routes, though, I guess we could pick up at the armory, but there aren't sidewalks everywhere else but at the armory division.
That's a concern, we have to get the sidewalks.
Yeah, and Riley Road with no sidewalks, so there's certain areas we couldn't do that, we would have to pick it up and sell the sidewalk.
Have we thought about advertising for PTA drivers?
We might
Yeah,
be able
but they
to
have
do
to have
that.
a CDL.
I know when I talked to,
That we train
one of
them?
the assistants at, Lafayette schools, he said, or Tiffany schools, they said for summer school, they might have people who'd be willing to come out here and drive. Because they have such a, everybody wants to drive those to the summer. We might be able to hit up some other schools for some spare drivers for summer or ECA. But ECA would be tough if they have to drive a regular route and then be down here from Monticello or over here to Lafayette. Much better than Louisville, that only took them till 10 o'clock the first night to get everybody home.
Yes.
So, yeah, so.
But they only have 65,000 students, a little more than that.
Can't imagine. Any other questions for Mr. Streeter?
What is our rate for CCA bus drivers?
Top of my head, I can't, is it?
After school ECA,
Yeah,
15 an hour. Lafayette pays 20. But again, they're on the other big. And I'm not sure that would even make a difference.
yeah, I know. When we raised it, it's still, because it was lower, when we raised it, it didn't even make an impact. Same people are still driving.
I have a very aging fleet, it's 65, I'm middle-aged for my driver.
Yeah. We had a credit, phone call, so I gave you a draft. This is a draft, it's in your packet of the S&P Global, so it's not the actual one. We did go up from triple B plus, and they moved us up to double A plus, which is really good, I'm very happy with that. They talked a little bit about triple A, but they decided to hold off on putting us at triple A just yet, because they feel like the prognosis is really good, we're doing a great job, but they still have concerns, because it was just not too far ago that we were in some financial issues. So they said, though, if we keep going in this direction, the next rating will probably go up to that. But, I was happy we got it in double A, so that plus that moved us up several levels. Let's see here. Next board meeting, we will have a public hearing. We've got the budget, which, by the way, the net assessed value, we just received that today for 2024, did go up 12.79%. Just received that just today. So that's good news. And also collective bargaining this year. So we will have a public hearing for that in the September board meeting, so I'll make you aware. And finally, I want to talk about board agendas. So, in looking at, I gave you several in my packet board agendas. Looking at our board agenda, because Mr. Owen and I discussed about, we want the board agenda out earlier. Our problem is that our board agenda is so detailed and has so much information that it makes it near impossible for us to get this board agenda out in a timely fashion. So I started looking around, and if you will notice, Tiffany School Corporation, what theirs looks like. It has topics, it doesn't list all the employees, it doesn't list the pay amounts, it doesn't list any of that stuff, all that stuff goes into the packet. Rossville is literally a letter. I saw, and then Carroll would be more kind of the path that I would like to take, where they actually have the topics, but again, you're not listing everything out. So, talking to Mr. Owen, we were discussing about moving out and be more user friendly, I guess. Any questions on that? I gave you examples of 3 of them. I could not find Twin Lakes on their website at all, otherwise I would have included them.
So, you're just talking about basically cutting down the size of the agenda itself, but then when we get our packet, all the information will be in there?
Everything will be in there.
Okay, along those lines of information, I don't know what's, public information or what's, has to do with HIPAA, but, when we're hiring these days, I would like to see more information on our new hires than just whether they have a bachelor's degree or master's degree, or I'd like to know more background information on where they went to school, what they took in school possibly, things like that.
Your resume?
Yeah, I'd like to see a bigger resume on the people that we're hiring.
Copy of their license, things like that.
Yeah, the goal is to not overcomplicate this, but your board packet will have every piece of information that will follow suit with the agenda that we have. Which also, we always have a lot of yellow. We're never gonna avoid that, but you won't have that on the new agenda because it will already be under that subtitle. For those people, you'll get that email or, with the information on who's being hired and things like that. We've got 6 pages of information here tonight that probably could be done in maybe 1.5, to make it just basically easier for the meetings to flow, is what we're trying to do.
Okay. Good idea.
Okay. Administrative reports?
Yeah, 3B here, we need to start with the administrators' reports. So we have Camden and Delphi up first. Is there, you wanna talk about those, or?
Yeah, I asked the administrators, since the start of the school year, to do 2 things for us. To come up, I'm gonna have each administrator talk about their goals for this year, and talk about our data from their assessment. So, I figured that, to me, that's extremely important that it sets the tone for the school year, so I wanted to let each administrator talk about that. You received their board reports, which had detailed information on that as well. So, but I wanted to let the administrators come and have that conversation. So, Mr. Hawks, you get to read first.
Well, looking at our testing data from last year, the strengths were in a lot of areas. We were close to, and then even in one example, we were higher than the state average. The biggest area of concern for me is 3rd grade and 3rd grade scores, which were significantly below state averages. Looking at our iReady data, that isn't to put all of the blame for it on the 3rd grade teachers. 3rd grade teachers are making progress, but not enough to compensate for where their students come in. So going into the next 2 years, we're in the Indiana Early Literacy Cadre, where they provided us with the instructional coach and multiple other resources, including trainings for our K-2 staff that should help us raise those scores. And then in the area of math, we're going to continue to work with Diane McKinley's Encompassing Education to do a curricular map of our new resources.
With the 3rd grade being lower, if you will, does that stem from early on? I mean, I guess I don't really wanna keep talking about COVID, but those kids are coming up, they kind of were hit hard with that, going into 3rd grade.
I'm trying to move on, and talking to my staff also, I'm trying to move on from pointing the finger at COVID. It certainly didn't help anything. The places I worked prior to COVID, iRead scores were better and stronger than they are now, and they haven't completely recovered. So I would say that that's part of the problem, but it isn't the entire problem.
So some of our history in the past has been, move a kid on no matter what. I mean, if he can't read and we got a kid at fourth grade level that's reading second or third grade level, what measures do you see or can we do, if we're not willing to or want, and it goes back to parents too, I understand that on like retaining or whatever. We used to have a class in between, particularly kindergarten and first grade, I think they call it readiness at that time. I mean, is that right? You don't even remember. And so, is them are things that as a board, and I know it's funding, right? It's all about funding. But if we don't know how to maybe look at what the future may be and what you may need to correct this, because that is a big concern. I mean, when I looked at the numbers, I was shocked. And
and what comes out, like what gets printed, isn't really the whole story
right.
of third grade, because they only say who passed this year. They don't add in who passed as second graders.
Right, because you don't have a second grade metric.
Because the second graders, because the last 2 years since COVID, we've been allowed to test our second graders, and if those kids pass as second graders, they don't have to take it again as third graders.
Right.
So like going into this year, we had 48 third graders who had already passed iRead going into it. And then the scores that get released for last year are only the percent who passed for out of the students who were left.
Right. But this goes back though farther. I mean, this goes back, our past downward spiral
Sure.
has been going on for years now. And that's the part that seems like once we kind of went away from some of those other practices, maybe it was, we had a teacher for pullout, right? That some did the high abilities and that lowered class sizes. So instead of being 21 or 31 at that time, it actually get knocked down to, 17 or even 16 for the main core. These are the things that if we don't know as a board that what may or may not look good and what you guys are thinking to correct. I know you're just getting started into the data, and data can be spun any way you want to look at it. I look at long-term spirals.
Very true.
And so, Mrs. Circle, you even presented to the board one time about the spiral and math and some of that, well before COVID hit. And so, those are the things we need to know. The board did take great lengths to take K through 3 and try to knock it 21 and under, or 20 and under, I think probably what we phrased at that time. And that may vary sometimes. We might have 22 because class sizes, we understand that part. But, we made that effort, and I, at least as sitting on board, want to at least let all our administrators know that, if we have a good solid plan, at least for me, I'm willing to try to figure out, to come up with the dollars that it's going to take as we go forward, because there is going to be a drastic change how we need to change our funding on how we acquire those dollars. We did try the referendum, but we're going to have to go to option B, right? And so as we do that, if we can be kind of maybe a program of what you think or what you would see that would help bring those scores, that we don't pass kids on to where they're at fourth grade reading, or fifth grade reading, third or sixth grade reading fourth grade level, right? It's just not elementary, it's all the way up and through.
And this year's scores were 5% higher than last year.
Yeah.
So that is another strength. So I believe in what we're doing with the literacy cadre. There's a lot of communication between us and DOE with that. So I expect good things from it.
I could be wrong, we haven't had a reading series, we never adopted any literature or nothing in the elementary. So I could be wrong, but I feel like the fact that every teacher has a plan, we're not cohesive across the grade levels. So we have adoptions coming, and we will be getting the curriculum. I think that, I could be wrong, but I think that really was a big component of the fact that every teacher's having full resources. Technology is great, but I still think we need to have Tim, am I lying here?
You're preaching to the choir. I mean, you nailed it spot on. I mean, we have all these new teachers and things like this coming in, and a reading series, a curriculum, it's a foundation. If you're going to build a house, you start with the foundation, and I would totally agree with you, Mrs. Circle.
So I think that's another big thing that Mr. Hawk and I have talked about a lot.
I think when they made that move, they had a good plan in place, and then I think as we've moved away, because it's a 7-year cycle, we've had more and more staff turnover, and then it's been hard to continue to maintain the vertical alignment with the reading curriculum.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Cox? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Long, and he handed us some, his paper, some arrows on the back.
Good evening, everyone. So just to kind of go over the goals real quick for the middle school, this is off my school improvement plan, or our school improvement plan from last year, which is a 3-year window that they've had you go through. When looking at our data, it was kind of silly to sit there and say that we were going to jump up in certain areas up to the state average. It had been an unobtainable goal. So breaking that down, we really like to preach here. We don't get to pick those kids that come in 6th grade, so we're going to take the 6th grade, and by the time they're 8, make them grow as much as we possibly can. So as they come in, we want to look at year to year and getting them to grow 4%, because if you do the math on that, over 3 years they'd grow 12%. When you throw that up against the state average, now we're looking like we're right in that ball field in some of the categories, or we're way over if you look at some of the others. So I thought it was a realistic goal. Last year, obtained this year and on to next, especially with some of the changes that was started with Beth when she was there and I was teamed with her, and then continuing that with some of the scheduling in the labs, the MTSS programs and things of that nature. Just on the back, if you look at the data on there, I drew some little arrows because that follows the kiddos. It's kind of unfair to just look at 6th grade across the board when it's a completely different group of kids come in. You get more out of it by looking at, here's what these kids came in with, now where they're at in 7th, and then obviously in 8th on a 3-year kind of linear line there. So that's why I kind of gave that special ed with the things that Beth started, and then we continued and kind of worked together. We've had tremendous strides in that. You can see there from just the year prior to 21-22 when we came in, it was 0 across the board. 0 kids out of the entire middle school passed any at proficiency. You can see then last year, I'm not going to read everything to you, but you can see that we have grown tremendously in that department with working with teams here with Beth and our special ed department here at the middle school. So that's something to be proud of. You can also see if you follow the kids, we did grow other than in one class in the math, which is a good thing. So the majority of we're growing every year. We have one that's close to the 4%, which is the goal, and that's kind of a lofty goal. If we raise 2% a year, I'm feeling good about it. Obviously we want to get to that 4, but as long as you're still growing, I think it's big. And then just a couple notes about kind of some of these action steps that we've started. We'll have a new curriculum map with language arts this year that they created last year, our language arts department, along with encompassing education. So that'll be put into play this year, which I'm excited to see where that goes. And then also, this is our 2nd year of having the lab classes, which is grouping those kids by data and then having some extra time. And also the MTSS it will be in its 3rd year as well. So we're hoping to see that grow as well. And then with math, last year was a new book. With anything new, there's adjustments that come with it. I think I'm going to use that card for once, and then obviously you can't use it after that. But I do think a new curriculum, talking to the math teachers, it was in a different order, a different pacing, and that's something we've already met this year on the first day of teachers here to make sure that they're looking at last year, okay, what do we need to do different? Do we need to move things around, reorder, different pacing of the units, and so they're aware of that. We've met already, and then this will be something as the year goes along, they'll keep looking at those curriculum maps and adjusting them along the way, along with everybody else in the building too. The other kind of tweak that they're going to do to kind of help, we've moved algebra up to the high school so that there's consistency with the algebra teaching. And within that, Mr. Gasser, after last year using that book, really believes that 7th grade should probably just use the 8th grade curriculum book. and then implement and supplement that seventh grade math curriculum where needed, to kind of help those kids prepare more for that next jump into the algebra. So yeah, open to any questions or comments?
So eighth graders can still take algebra?
Mhm.
But they go to high school?
Yeah, it's just, so there's two different teachers teaching it, and then going to the one person that teaches that next level of Algebra 2, there was some inconsistency with anybody that's teaching two different things. It doesn't matter, there's gonna be some inconsistency. So trying to even that across the board and help our students just be more prepared, especially the ones that are ahead. We want them all to just keep jumping that next spot, so.
So on the iLearn data, that includes special ed in those percents, right? Or special ed out of those percent?
No, that's with them
That's
in there.
total,
So
right?
like the eighth grade, that 50%
Right.
really bumped us up, and then sixth grade, that 0 you see really goes down.
So what would it look like data-wise when you start pull special ed out of these figures? Where do we compare at that point? So you have basically three groups of students going through. You have our special ed, you have our core, what I'll call core, and then you have your high ability. And, you know, when you get down to it, then the next step is, of course, how many of us, both of them passing, right? The EL as well as the math, right?
Yeah.
Because we see that lot down below 2 grades. So what percent of those students, because that probably tends to be maybe, I shouldn't say it this way, more of the high ability kids are passing that way.
Right.
But I'd be interested to see how our, you know, carve out our special ed, so we, again, as we go forward, and you guys, Ms. Stansberry, you know, she's already sat here and said, hey, here's how special ed, we're asking you to do these things, right? So our special ed should be starting to take care of it a lot better, right? So then the focus comes back on that core. What are we doing for that core? Because that's the core, that's the ones that actually will rise up, and you talk about a 4%, they're more of a 10% gain, right? Because 4% on.
Well, it's actually two separate things. The
Well, I know.
Yeah, oh, okay.
But what I'm saying is, when you look at these, we should be able to see a little bit better score for that core. And so it's not perceived as Delphi is low on the, because I see this and you're 26 and the state average is whatever, you know. You pull that out, actually that score goes up.
Those averages are the same for all schools.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is it's still perceived. Again, I wanna know, at least where I sit, is we've made a special effort for special ed. I want to know where that core is. Our high ability are taking care of themselves because they actually gain, they're like a sponge too. I want that core to start being a sponge. And I think sometimes we leave that core out, and I want to know kind of where that data is, so what we can do to help those core become the high ability.
Right. And that's kind of already taken place with the lab classes and the restructuring of the schedules. We look at that data, and then if they need that extra time, then they get put in those classes along with the MTSS kids, which is more that tier 3, more that one-on-one. So
Okay.
those things are in place. I'm excited to see kind of where this starts to go. Like I said, this is our second year of the lab classes, so it's kind of hard to make a jump decision on, you know, are these working or not? You know, everybody's got an opinion that's teaching them, and I'm like, okay, just let's write it out here and see where we end up, you know, after year 2 and year 3, and then we can make a decision if this is actually working or do we need to tweak it more. And we still are tweaking it as we go. You know, who's teaching what. That was another thing that we did moving into this year with the extra language arts, not extra because it's working, but the fourth language arts teacher. It really keeps our class sizes down. The thing that we're trying right now is the math trying to do the same as language arts, but only has 3 teachers. So we're trying to balance those schedules and get those numbers down as well, so that, you know, they're benefiting from that small atmosphere too. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what I'm gonna say, cause my computer just died.
Blame the
Good plan. Yeah, yeah, all right, so you guys know Sam's well enough, no, I don't really need that computer anyway, so. You know, for us, it's like a combination of 12 years, obviously. And the big thing that matters at our level is graduation rate. Getting kids across the stage, shaking their hand and handing the diploma. That's the whole purpose of what we're here for. So
when you look at that graduation rate that I shared with you, from the class of 2023, it's 84.6. Don't fall out of your chair on that, because, you know, that starts from the time they enter our high school as freshmen. We lose a lot of those students way before they ever get to their senior year. So don't think that, my God, out of our senior class, only 84% of them graduated. That's not necessarily true. They took off and went other places and disappeared, and a lot of those we don't have any control over whatsoever. And the SAT class of 2024 was at 28%, so that's at benchmark. But my goal is graduation rates, is to try to convince kids that are freshmen to hang it out, do what they need to do, get through our educational system, walk out of here with a diploma. So how do we go about doing that? You know, Mrs. Circle started this years ago, where you have weekly meetings with people, whether it be department heads or whether it be, you know, your support system, whether it be your student services. And what you have to do is figure out those that are struggling. And assuming you figure out those that are struggling, the better job you can do is saving them, if that's appropriate. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get kids that possibly don't show up to school because of attendance, whatever the reason is. Statistics, data will tell you that if they're at school, they'll do okay. But there's a lot of our students that struggle with getting to school for a lot of different reasons. And so that's one of the things that we have to get accomplished, is knowing what the issues are with our kids, trying to fix those issues, trying to pair those kids up with faculty members, administrators, student service people, counselors that have a relationship, and make sure they get through what they have to get through in order to get a diploma. And that's really where it's all about. And I learned that in a really quick, short period of time, I can tell you. So the other thing is that some of the testing scores, state testing scores, I get frustrated from the point of that I'm not sure a lot of our students, not only ours, but those all over the country, don't take much of that testing very seriously. So one of the things that we've already talked about with our homeroom faculty members, which we do have a homeroom now that is consistent, and it's by grade level. So one of the things that I hope to get accomplished with some of our faculty members is to express to our students that they need to figure out that that testing actually does matter to them, that they need to take it seriously. They need to actually prepare for it the best they can. They actually need to get some rest and actually make an attempt that's 100% effort, as opposed to, I just got to do this. And there's a whole bunch of our kids that I think need that that extra push, and probably test scores just from that alone probably would go up. The one thing that Kirk talked about earlier, when Andrew was up here, holding kids back in the elementary school. My view of that is way different than everybody else's is, because what I've seen and what I've witnessed is that a junior that turns 18 years old is going to give up way quicker than a 17-year-old who's struggling. So those things matter, and I get it. Reading is everything. There is no question in the world. If you can read, you can accomplish almost anything. But at the same time, you got to be careful holding kids back too many times, or at what age, because you don't want juniors that turn 18 years old, I can tell you that. I've lived it with Mrs. Circle over the years, and I lived it last year. So that's a tough thing to figure out. So that's a big issue as well. Goals for us, school culture. I said last year, we're going to figure out how to have fun again, which seems pretty simple. But those of you that have been close to the educational system in the last 5 years realized that there was about a 2-year period where it wasn't much fun. It was just not much fun. There wasn't much purpose in anything. You had to sit 6 feet apart and wear a mask. It wasn't much fun. And so we've done a lot of things. Last year's senior class really made a difference in our school culture. I'm asking the class of 2024 to even show better leadership, and hopefully that, along with our faculty being more involved, doing more things, showing up to more events, making sure they're at school, making sure they're present and teaching, will continue to increase our culture. So that's where we're at. Questions?
Can you tell us what the senior, not freshman up, but our percentage, what we've been graduating now, the senior class itself, from start of the year to end, where we've been at?
Been pretty high, really. I mean, it's been in the high mid-90s, about.
So once we get them there, we've done a really
Yeah,
good job, right?
absolutely.
It's from that.
A lot of that has to do with, the ladies in student service have stayed on top of senior classes. They rotate who's in charge of the senior class with our guidance counselors. So this year it's Mrs. Kirkwood with the senior class. Last year it was Mrs. Bigler. But that attention to detail coming to my office once a week is huge. I mean, I can drag kids into my office, a month into the school year and say, hey, we gotta get something accomplished here because we aren't getting much accomplished. And you can save a lot of kids, and that's a big factor.
So are those kids from freshmen to basically juniors? Because we're doing a very good job as a senior, the ones who get a senior. Are they dropouts, or does that include move-outs to another school? It doesn't, does it? It's actually like a dropout of an education system.
Yeah, homeschooling counts against us.
Homeschooling does
Yeah,
count.
yes.
Okay.
And if they move to another state and they just never get into another school,
Transfer it out.
yeah, we don't get a record of them getting into another school,
But we
then
do have
it
a
counts
record.
against us.
But we do have a record of homeschool.
Well,
So-
they sign a paper saying, but it
But
saves us.
but it counts against us. So.
Yes.
Right.
And it did not used to. So if you look like, I think it's the first year of the high school, or the grade high school, with
Yeah.
everybody, because homeschool counted,
Right.
so.
So that's a figure that we have no control over, that there is no.
It literally, I mean, it literally is, everybody coming up to the high school really are the nuts and bolts of what's happening.
Right.
I mean, Andrew's group and Josh's group, once they get to the high school, there's obviously the credits matter, and getting them to a diploma matters immensely. But that basic background of education is instilled on them. And then it just becomes, in my opinion, it becomes relationships. And, our faculty members are pretty good at building relationships with kids, and that matters a lot. And I think that's very helpful. It's obviously helpful with our seniors every year.
Do your senior class sponsors follow up like after every grading period, they take an active role and follow, and who doesn't pass like the first 9 weeks, the second 9 weeks?
Well, not so much our sponsors as our homeroom teachers will do that 2 times a week when they